Hello and welcome one more time to our chats regarding energy, sponsored by the Ronnie K. Rani Center for Energy Solutions and the University of Oklahoma. Today, Roderick Perez, my friend, and myself, we are going to discuss a topic that is dear to my heart, the oil and gas industry future. And a lot of people recently especially people that are not in the energy industry, when talking to me, they mentioned that the oil era is near his end, and we should get rid of petroleum products and petroleum entirely. So, uh, going for a career or a future in the energy industry should not be a good decision. And we are going to probably discuss that topic in maybe one or two chats in this section. So before that, I'm going to pass the bat to Roderick, and he's going to talk about some of the news that we have recently on the oil industry.
Well, thanks, Luis, and thanks for everybody for the opportunity to listen us today. Yes, and today we're going to start about what is the current oil prices, natural gas in the U.S. And as we can see, there is still high prices, close to 88 in the WTI, and the Brent is close to 93. And the natural gas is around $9 per BTU. The thing is that, as you can see, there is a huge spike in the last few days, and I think it's related to recent news that we have been in the news. And basically, today, I think that the OPEC already released some news that they're going to cut production, and it's around 2 million barrels that they're going to cut from the market. And this is one of the reasons that probably the oil prices has been increasing again. I mean, as you may imagine, that this is against all the forecasts in terms of try to reduce the oil price and try to boost the economy. For the reason some of the presidents around the world, led by Joe Biden, has been showing his discomfort about this news. And another interesting news that we found in the news today was that the England already start to propose to ban the gas fracking as a method to increase production in their own countries. And if you can go to the next slide, please. And personally, this is also some news that it really reached into my heart because, as you may know, I'm living here in Austria, and there is a news that it appeared around 2 or 3 weeks ago on the newspaper, and the translation is Texas in the Wien-Württemberg. That is the basin around this area that Vienna is located. And as you may, maybe for you that they are not familiar with the Austrian map, as we can see here, the dark, let's say the dark orange is mostly where the Alps are, or the Alpines area are, which is like no go on no prospectivity. However, in the light orange, as well as the yellow area, in the yellow area is where the Vienna is located, as well as where I'm living. And as you can see, some green and red spots. The green is related to the oil production, and the red is about the gas production. And it has been a lot of potential here in the country. However, due to the political reasons, the production of hydrocarbon in the area, not only here, and this is just a very short example, but it's something that is happening in the entire Europe. And I think the news that England is to start to ban or to try to promote again the fracking is something interesting that we can analyze, and it's related about the topic of today. Do you think again now let me ask you, Luis, do you think that we are in the end of the oil or the hydrocarbon era?
Well, like Mark Twain used to say, reports of the death of my death, or in this case, the death of the oil industry, are greatly exaggerated. So why is that? Well, generally, I've been talking to a lot of my friends and people in other industries and asking them, why do you think the oil industry is dying? And they mention several factors that I managed to group in four main issues. The first one is environmental issues. mainly related to pollution. Sometimes they don't even know what type of pollution they're talking about. All they know is that the oil industry pollutes. That's all. Renewable energy, of course, and the idea is that the renewable energy will totally replace the oil and gas energy generated energy. Electric vehicles. Some people have this myth, this idea that or the oil and gas essentially only generate energy to propel cars, and the only use that we have for oil is to, make gasoline. And new technologies. So, in summary, environmental issues. I'm not going to deny that there is some pollution and there is pollution in the oil industry, but there is pollution in all industries. And like any other industry, the oil and gas industry can increasingly become more environmentally friendly, and it has, as a matter of fact. If you compare the 1970s to today, in the last 50 years, the oil industry has made significant advances in developing new technologies and doing things in a better and more environmentally friendly way. Renewables and electric vehicles can be seen as a complement, not as a challenge or as a replacement to the oil and the gas industry. And the way I see things, and we're going to enter in the details about this, the only real threat I can see will come from new technologies that are not yet invented or that have to be yet created. So let me explain this in more detail. In general, in our history as mankind, we have evolved our energy needs across several years, going from long and heavy chains of hydrocarbons to smaller and lighter hydrocarbon molecules. So in the ancient times, our main source of energy was, of course, burning wood. And if you look at wood is essentially a long chain of polymers and hydrocarbons that we just burn. And recently, around the 1800s, and you could argue that even in the 1700s a little bit, we started using coal. But mainly during the Industrial Revolution, once we figured out the steam engine, we really increased the use of coal. And coal is, of course, again, not as long as wood, but still long chains of hydrocarbons. And then we moved to oil with the invention of the internal combustion engine, which, of course, is still shorter in hydrocarbons. And now gas, natural gas is probably the shortest hydrocarbon that you can think, is CH4, which is just one molecule. But we are now in a phase where we can also find other sources of energy that are not related to hydrocarbons, like nuclear energy or solar energy or wind and so on. So are these energies really, or these things can really replace entirely the oil and gas industry? And that seems to be the myth. That seems to be the idea. Oil and gas is past. We're going to replace all that with renewables and nuclear energy. Well, let's talk about that. I'm in the U.S. and Roderick is in Austria, so we have a tendency to talk about our countries a little bit regarding this topic. And in the U.S., I'm showing you here the data. Natural gas is the main source of electricity. So if you want to generate energy, and of course one of the main sources of energy is electricity, if you want to generate energy, natural gas accounts for about 40% of the energy generated in the United States. With renewables, nuclear, and coal, each one of those generate about 20% of the remaining energy. So 60% of the energy comes from renewables, nuclear, and coal. And you could argue also that 60% of the energy, in this case natural gas and coal combined, come from hydrocarbons. Now, the thing is, coal has a tendency to be replaced by natural gas in the generation of electricity in the following years, in the following decades, not because of the pollution issue, which of course plays a role, but because of the efficiency, the energy efficiency issue. The combined cycle plants that generate electricity via natural gas are much more efficient than any coal power generating plant. Nuclear, of course, is a very interesting idea, but we have seen what we could call the Fukushima effect. And several countries like Germany, for instance, are phasing out entirely nuclear because they see nuclear as a significant problem. So really the only two sources of growth for future energy demand comes from renewables and natural gas, if you think. And we can see that in projections that the Energy Information Administration does. The energy outlook of 2022 shows these graphs that we can discuss briefly. Natural gas, of course, accounts for the big chunk of energy consumption that we are going to see in the future from 2020 to 2050. And behind that, we have hydrocarbon gas liquids, what we call NGLs, natural gas liquids. So if you think about it, if you combine natural gas and hydrocarbon gas liquids, that big chunk is entirely related to natural gas production. Petroleum and oil liquids are in brown and renewables and purchase electricity from other sources. And if you look at the projections of the energy consumption, you can see that petroleum and oil liquids and natural gas are still growing significantly, even though coal, which is in gray, disappears as a source with a big market share, but it doesn't disappear to zero. It gets reduced to a lower volume, a lower market share in the consumption of energy, but it doesn't disappear entirely. Nuclear, right now the expectation is going to stay roughly flat and maybe reduce a little bit because of the way we see nuclear energy right now, which could change in the future, of course. But as of today, these are the expectations on the energy. So how come natural gas consumption and petroleum consumption is going to keep going up if we are going to have electric vehicles and we're going to have all this situation? I mean, I thought that, again, this is a myth, right? If you get electric vehicles, you should get rid of oil. I don't know if, Roderick, you have seen that kind of myth also going on in Austria?
What do you mean?
The myth that with electric vehicles, we can get rid of oil and gas.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But not necessarily. It's because here, and I will speak first here in Austria, the people rely a lot in the public transportation. In general, I think Austria is one of the Vienna. It has the best public transportation system in one of the biggest cities. Let's say it in the top 5, and for the reason the people mostly travel through public transport, such as train and so on. For the reason that specific statement maybe is not so valid here because of that. But of course, as a general sense, the people think in the same way.
Yeah. So everybody sees the oil and gas industry as a dying industry, when all the projections done by the American government and several other agencies actually see some growth in the future. And so how can we reconcile that? How come government agencies and industry leaders are thinking that the oil industry demand is going to keep going up, but the general public sees the oil industry as dying? I think the reason for that is this: electric vehicles. Every time that I talk to someone regarding the future of the energy industry, I kid you not, within the first 5 minutes of the discussion, they will bring up electric vehicles. And the main argument is, yeah, I mean, come on, all the cars are going to be electric in the future. And they have a reason to believe that. If you see here, these are the internal combustion engine bans or electrification targets as of, I believe that was June 2022. So Norway, for instance, is supposed to have a 100% zero-emission vehicle sales by 2025. In other words, if you want to sell a car in Norway, if it's not a zero-emission vehicle in 2025, you're not going to be able to sell it. The same goal has been set by 2030 for all these countries that you see here, from Denmark down to Sweden. The UK limits that only on the 100% electrified sales. So it doesn't want zero-emission vehicles just like that. It means it has to be electrified vehicles. In 2035, we have other countries, and around 2035, recently we have not just here in the United States, not just California, but also New York, that is about to pass a law that says essentially that all sales of vehicles after 2035 should be zero-emission vehicles. And you can see all that on different countries, and increasingly more and more countries are joining this wave. So let's say the wave continues, and likely will. Let's assume a moment that down the road, the future is going to be entirely electrified by vehicles that are zero emissions or electric. Can we say then that the oil industry is dead then because there is no production of gasoline or there is no need for gasoline? Well, let's see about that. These are the projections again for the light-duty vehicle sales by technology or fuel that the Energy Information Administration has. You can see here how gasoline vehicles are still going to be a big chunk of sales. And the chunk of sales, or the pie of sales coming from electric plug-ins or battery electric or flex fuel vehicles, is still not going to be as big as the gasoline chunk that you're going to have here. So even though the growth on electric vehicles and let's say non-gasoline vehicles is going to keep going, the fact is it's going to take a lot more time to replace entirely gasoline vehicles, not just until 2040 or 2050. And here, the Energy Information Administration is validating the situation where electric vehicle sales are going to skyrocket. So there is no discontinuity here in the data. It's not that we are denying that electric vehicles are going to be sold and that they will increase their sales. They are. The expectation is, yes, electric vehicle sales are going to increase and by a lot. And you can see here in this graph. But the fact is, to replace entirely the pool of vehicles that are driven by internal combustion engines, you're going to need more than just 20 or 30 years. And you can see the slope here is not a steep slope, so the change doesn't happen as fast as some people might imagine. This is a phase out. Let's say, assume for a moment that we can phase out entirely internal combustion engine vehicles. This is a phase out that could take a little bit more than 100 years in the best case scenario. Again, it's because of the production of electric vehicles and of the minerals, all the things that you need to produce those vehicles, battery efficiencies. There are a lot of topics that we can talk about, which is why I was telling Roderick just a moment ago that I believe that we should have 2 chats to discuss all this data. But the main point I'm trying to make with this slide is, yes, electric vehicles are the future. I agree with that. I'm actually a big supporter of that. Probably I will buy my next car, very likely is going to be an electric vehicle. But at the same time, thinking that electric vehicles are going to totally replace internal combustion engine vehicles by 2050 is just a dream. Is not even possible.
But Luis, do you think that this decision that you're going to have, if you have the option, would you like to do it more like because it's by your own desire, or is because a government tell you, or let's say like a major regulator tell you that you need to, that you don't have another option? Do you think that could be the right approach into this problem?
I have a rather controversial answer to that. I am a capitalist, so I am really pro free choice. So my first answer will be just let people decide which type of car that you want. But even if governments implement a measure that forces you to buy an electric car, I will not be entirely in disagreement with that. Other than the fact that it's a forced decision, which is the part that I disagree with, I do believe that the future is on electric vehicles. I do believe there are better vehicles than internal combustion engine vehicles. Just because of the parts, for instance. Just basic engineering. I'm an engineer at the heart, so I like that. The amount of moving pieces in an electric vehicle, and amount of pieces actually that you have in an electric vehicle are a lot less than in an internal combustion engine. So the rate of failure and the reliability of electric vehicles, by definition, should be a lot better than regular internal combustion engine vehicles. Not only that, for instance, you don't have to change the oil in an electric vehicle. You don't have to replace as many parts. The electric vehicle maintenance is going to be a lot easier. So I am not against electric vehicles, and I am not against governments incentivizing people to buy electric vehicles. If they want to give you tax havens or tax benefits for incentivizing that, I will not disagree with that. Now, forcing you is the part that makes me a little bit itchy. But I will not be entirely mad about it. I mean, if the governments want you to buy electric vehicles and they think that the best choice is to force you to do that, then it's entirely for the people and the population or local population to decide whether that's a good law or not, and make choices to elect officials that will change the law or not. But the general trend should be to go from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles. I think they are the future, and I believe they are better vehicles, again, just because of the engineering of the vehicle, than an internal combustion engine. Now, there is the problem of power and whether you can have a big truck, for instance, like the kind of vehicles that you see on an open pit mine, driven by electric engines. That's going to be a challenge, and you could argue even that semis that are entirely driven by electric power are not as powerful as a diesel engine. So there are some issues here that maybe with future technology we can improve, but electric vehicles are good, and we should be pro electric vehicles. I am against governments telling you you have to use a vehicle that is electric, but I am not against incentivizing or strongly incentivizing the purchase of electric vehicles. What do you think, Roderick?
No, I think not only about call it electric, because right now it is a huge push and a lot of incentivation, let's call it this way, about hydrogen cars. The one of the huge for me in my humble and my humble opinion and research, the electric car it could be like a dream. It have a lot of benefits. However, the point is that at this point, I think that the replacement of the battery it could cost more than a regular car, of the car itself, and everything that is related with what to do with the battery after that. I mean, there is a lot of things that the people or the regular consumer may think that it's not a that is. I mean, they don't think about that when they think to buy a car at the day one. But for example, I think that I'm a strong believer that hydrogen cells, fuel cells, cars could be a better option. And but they have been there is everything related now about like, oh hey, how can I refuel the car and how long can I drive with it? And there is we know that is a change that is coming, but we need to at this point 2022 we need to live with the best of the both worlds. And yes, now
Yeah.
that's my thought.
Yeah, electric vehicles are a good thing, and fuel cells, in other words, hydrogen powered vehicles, could be even better if we manage to produce hydrogen in an efficient manner. And that's a problem because inherently, one of the ways that we think, if you're a chemistry professor, for instance, the first thought that you are going to have if somebody tells you how do you produce hydrogen, he's going to think probably, hey, let's go to water via electrolysis, which is of course possible. Yes, you can produce hydrogen from water. Problem is the amount of energy that you're going to put in the water to generate electrolysis is bigger than the amount of energy that you're going to get out of from the hydrogen. And that's a matter of chemistry. It's indisputable. You have to put more energy to create the hydrogen from water than the energy that you're going to get from the hydrogen. So it comes to the situation that we were discussing. Unless I have energy that is going to be wasted anyway, I will not produce hydrogen from water via electrolysis. But it comes to mind that we do have energy that can be wasted right now. We have wind energy and solar energy that can be produced when the sun is going, or when you have a nice sunlight, or when you have a nice wind going. But maybe people at the time when you have that energy being produced are not going to consume all of that energy. So essentially, you end up having to turn off some of the windmills or something like that. And I have seen this in the windmills here in Texas. Sometimes you have a really great wind, and you go to the windmills, and half of the windmills are stopped because the demand is just not there. Now, we could use that additional energy that is going to be wasted anyway to generate the hydrogen, and then, of course, use that in fuel cells. I agree with that. That's a possibility. But I don't think that we're going to get enough volumes of hydrogen to power an entire fleet in a country like the United States that is entirely driven by hydrogen vehicles. The other source of hydrogen, if you want to produce big masses of hydrogen, is of course what we use today, which is methane. And there is a chemical process that we use today to produce hydrogen in industrial quantities. But the main raw material for that is methane. So it comes to mind again that methane happens to be hydrocarbon and is what we call natural gas. And then we go back to the oil and gas industry. So right now, even if we think of a future of only hydrogen cars, the oil and gas industry is still going to be there because we're still going to need to produce natural gas to produce the hydrogen in big quantities enough to supply an entire country. So as you can see, this is not an easy solution. We're just not going to get rid of gasoline and boom, automatically the oil and gas industry disappears. There is going to be an entire process. And this graph explains entirely this process. You can see how the Energy Information Administration is projecting the increase of sales of electric vehicles. You can see that it's ramping up a lot. And the oil production or the petroleum consumed by the transportation sector in the United States is still going to go up too. Yes, there's going to be a period of adjustment where the consumption can go down a little bit, but the general forecast is still going to go up. And it's because of what we just discussed. Again, you cannot just get rid of the oil and gas industries because we use this industry for several issues, and not just production of gasoline. My friends at the Visual Capitalist website, they prepare a really good analysis on a Model X vehicle. The Model X vehicle that you see here has been broken down into pieces, and every piece has been analyzed and separated between two main components: plastic or polymers that are petroleum derived, or anything else that is not petroleum derived, in this case metal or some kind of other type of substances. What you see in blue is the amount of parts that are not related to petroleum industry or are not derived from the petroleum. What you see in brown are the amount of parts, including the tires, of course, that are derived from polymers or plastic materials or entirely derived from the petroleum industry. So even to produce an electric vehicle, you need petroleum, which explains why the graph that we saw just a moment ago is still going to ramp up. Again, you're going to need petroleum to produce the vehicle, to manufacture the vehicle, and then you're going to need natural gas to power it. Electric vehicles are really what in the oil and gas industry we call gas to wire. You burn natural gas to produce electricity, and that electricity is the one that you use to charge the vehicle. So an electric vehicle is just another way of consuming natural gas, if you think about it. So what you have here is 50% of the vehicle requires plastics or materials that are derived from the petroleum, and even powering the vehicle is going to require natural gas. So no, there is no way to really get rid of hydrocarbons, at least not with technology that we currently have. And that might be the question that we can debate into maybe in the next chat. Can we have future technologies that might actually entirely replace the oil and gas industry? And I think that would be a good topic for the next chat. What do you think, Roderick?
No, that's awesome, and I mean this problem or this issue never ends. For the reason, I would like you if you can share my screen before we leave. That will be something nice. Luis,
you're gonna have to share it yourself, Roderick.
Oh yeah. I'm right now. Well, here I just say that you're in the show. Well, the point is that I don't know if this last name it will be familiar for you. Hubbard, and in 1956 he published the famous Hubbard peak oil prediction. And as you remember, he mentioned that in the 1965 will be the end of the oil at the peak production. And he was he was a geologist. Yeah. And well, he was also a part of the U.S. Geological Survey. I mean, he was a kind of like someone with some reputation. However, the thing is that all the time there has been a lot of proposal and some kind of like theories that when the oil is going to end. And the thing is that, in my humble opinion, and I hope that you think, I think that you think in the same way like me, not the oil production is not only related with the capacity, or like how much oil do we have underground. I think we have plenty oil still to extract from the underground. However, the issue is the economy good enough, or at the time to perform economical model if to a project that it is going to be profitable, because at the end of all this is a business and you need to make money of that. And as much as the oil price, it is good enough in order to extract this hydrocarbon from the ground, we're going to have oil for more than, I don't know, decades. I think that's the main conclusion about this. And for the reason, now coming back of the beginning of the presentation today, with an oil price roughly around $190 per barrel, a lot of the projects that were not economically before, right now they're economical, and I think we're going to continue having a boost in all this. Now, what do you think?
Well, that's a good question. The main issue that I have with peak theory, yes, it is true, but with one assumption. Every mathematical theory or every mathematical truth requires assumptions to actually be true. Peak theory requires one significant assumption, which is what some people call ceteris paribus in Latin, which means all other things remaining constant, or all other things remaining equal. So if all other things remain equal, yes, there will be a peak of production in oil, and then the production comes down because oil is a non-renewable resource. Problem with that is all things do not stay equal all the time. For instance, by the time in the 1970s, when peak theory came to light, it was almost impossible to predict that you could actually extract oil from shales. I work in a lab, and I remember looking at the permeability of a shell when I was working in the lab, and I measured the core and I measured the permeability. It was 0.001 millidarcies, which I remember telling my friend, this is solid. This is absolutely no porosity, no permeability. I know the oil is in there. There's no way to get it out. This is a solid that there's no way it's going to produce anything. And at the time, this was back in 1999, at the time that I was doing those experiments, that was true. Nobody was expected to produce oil from a shell. But fast forward 10 years, just 10 years, by 2010, we were producing already, using fracking to produce oil from those very same impermeable rocks. So the problem that I have with peak theory is exactly that. And as a matter of fact, you can see it if you look at the production history of the United States. The production of the United States peaked around the 1970s, it came down, and then it ramped up again rapidly around the 2010s because of the shale production. So peak theory went out of the window because ceteris paribus is not true. Things will change, people will find new ways, people will have new technologies, or as my favorite movie says, life will find a way, and we will find a way. So the main issue that I have with the demise of the oil industry right now is that a lot of people, a lot of good brains, are deciding to go to different careers or to different sections or different areas, thinking that the oil and gas industry has no future. When if you look at the evidence and you look at the actual data, it's entirely the opposite. There is no future without the oil and gas energy. Right now, we have what you could argue with me about this, but I will call this war, the Russia-Ukraine war, the first war derived entirely because of natural gas. I know that in the news you hear that Putin wants to create a new Soviet Union and it's political and blah, blah, blah. But in reality, all this comes down to energy supply from Russia to Europe and control of Europe, political control of Europe via natural gas. And right now, you guys in Europe are having problems with energy and energy costs because of this war. If we had wars in the past and regarding oil, this is the first war that we could have, or we could say we have, because of natural gas. So the migration or the transition from heavy hydrocarbons to lighter hydrocarbons that we show at the beginning, it's happening, it's real, and it will continue. What do you think?
No, definitely. Again, the main conclusion is ceteris paribus. We can make a lot of predictions. However, if suddenly something better comes, I'm really sure it will replace a lot of things. However, it is very important to remark to the audience that I think that you mentioned it before, that the people should or may assume that the gasoline is the main resource that we can extract from the hydrocarbon. However, that is not. I mean, the plastics, and there are a lot of things that at this moment we cannot produce without the carbon change that we only can find from the hydrocarbon.
And
And
that's a very good point, Roderick. Maybe what we need to do for the next talk is actually show people what petroleum is actually used for and in
yeah,
what quantities, and then talk about what potentially we need to invent or create to entirely replace oil. And then people will see that things are not as easy as just simply replacing gasoline. Let's have that talk next time, next week. How about at the same time?
perfect. Yeah, I think that it was a
Perfect.
pleasure to meet you today, and thanks to the audience for listening to us, and thank for the OU energy center for that. Oh, let's go to read a comment. Coal has been dying since 1960, and even today, the U.S. is consumed significantly. Yeah, that is true, and I think, I mean, it is very important to highlight that it has been an effort since we cannot deny that is coal has been a very there is the worst in terms of pollution, but at the same time, I think it's the easiest to turn on to convert from the raw product to energy. And I
Yeah.
think in crisis moments, this is the first choice. What do you think, Luis?
There's one easier, one that is even easier, wood. But then again, we're not using
Well,
wood to propel our cars. The same way we're not using coal to propel our trains anymore. You cannot find steam engines these days in any train. That will be archaic. So yes, the coal industry has been in decline for several years. I agree with the user, with the comment. However, it was really hit hard once the natural gas industry became dominant via shales. When the shale industry developed techniques to produce all that natural gas that was trapped in those shales economically, that's when the coal industry realized, okay, we're in trouble, and coal should be having a market share that's going to be significantly less than what it used to be. And it's simply because of energy. If you go have a coal plant, you're going to burn coal to overheat water, generate the steam, and produce electricity. If you have natural gas, not only you are going to use a turbine to burn that gas and generate heat, you can also use what it's called combined cycle. And even though we are running out of time, maybe we can talk about combined cycles in the next chapter too. But a combined cycle, just to summarize, a combined cycle energy plant will have almost double the efficiency of a coal plant. So right now, if you work for an electricity company and you suggest right now to build a new coal-fired power plant, you're going to get fired immediately. What you need to build is a natural gas plant. That's beyond any doubt, and that's what's actually happening right now in the United States, and that's why the market share of natural gas in the production of electricity has increased so much. I think we're running out of time. Thank you very much for your assistance, Roderick, and thank you all the audience for listening to us. And I'll see you guys next week, and we just discuss what topic we're going to have. We're going to discuss the future of the energy industry again, with what are we actually using the oil for, and what technologies we're going to need to replace totally oil and gas. Thank you.
okay. Okay. Bye bye.